Hi, everybody. So, this is episode 7, and I'm going to be talking about El Cacique Guacanagari. And as a reminder to everybody, I'm doing these videos so us Dominicans born and raised outside of the island can better learn our history, our culture, and who we are as a people. Guacanagari was the main cacique for the Cacicasco of Marian. We know that the island was split into several cacicascos, and as we see here, we have Jaragua, Marian, Maguana, Magua, and Higüe. Here are the caciques of each cacicasco. So we have Boecio in Jaragua, Guarionex in Magua, Guacanagaris. So the correct way, the indigenous way to say it is Guacanagari, because the X was J back in the day. But he was the one for Marian. And then Caunabo was Maguana, and Cayacoa was Higüe. There was a cacica before Cayacoa, but she was unalived very quickly by the Spanish. I'm going to use the name that most people are familiar with, which is Guacanagari. And he was, as I've said, the cacique of Marian all the way in the upper northwest of the island. So it covered both this side of the island and parts of what today is the Dominican Republic. And it's important to understand that these people were not allied. They all could decide whatever they wanted in terms of allies, in terms of enemies. And we note that at the time of Colón's arrival, Caunabo and Guacanagari were enemies. Colón and Guacanagari met before he slammed La Santa Maria into the side of the island. It wasn't actually Colón who did it. It was a boy who was left at the steering of the ship, even though this was prohibited. The guy who was steering the ship got sleepy and decided, hey, I'll let a 14-year-old steer the ship. Guacanagari had actually been on Colón's boat before the crash, and it was on the boat that they decided to establish basically a treaty. Through his indigenous guides, which included El Indio Diego Colón, he was able to communicate to a certain extent with Guacanagari. He sealed a pact of supposed friendship and trade. When the Santa Maria crashed, Colón actually sent 2 people to find Guacanagari plus Al Indio Diego Colón. He sent Diego de Arana and Pedro Gutierrez to find him. And they came running. They came to help Colón empty the ship. But since it was still nighttime when this happened, he actually sent a good amount of his people to guard the ship and its contents during the entire night. Guacanagari allowed Colón to establish the first fortress or fortaleza in Las Americas, Europea, and he even helped him build it. Colón, in exchange, promised to protect Guanacanari and his people from his enemies, including the Caribs. He left the entire fortress of La Navidad in the hands of Guacanagari and his people. And he warned his men to not venture further inland than where La Navidad was established. He also told them to not separate one from the other, but to stay within the fortress. But when Colón returned on his second trip, he couldn't find them. The fortress was gone. Colón was completely distraught. He had already felt guilty about leaving these 39 men. We now know that there were also women in this fortress. And to come back and see everything destroyed. And not only that, but to find several bodies around the location. Supposedly, he even cried. But he was also furious. He needed to find Guacanagari. He sent out El Indio Diego Colón with some men to find him. And they found him, but he was injured. He told these men that he had been injured fighting against the person who had destroyed La Navidad, Caunabo. And not only Caunabo had had allies. He had attacked with the help of another cacique, Beechu of Jaragua. In some accounts, I have also read that Caunabo's brother was also involved, and his name was Mariani. The men left to report back to Colon after receiving gifts of gold from Guacanagari. They let Colon know what Guacanagari had explained to them. And the next day, Guacanagari sent his own brother to invite Colon to come to his cane and see for himself. The ship's physician, El Doctor Chanca, writes, the admiral went ashore along with most of the leaders, and they found Guacanagari sitting in his hammock, surrounded by his wife and other ladies in waiting. They quickly noticed that he was also surrounded by guards.